would this be classified as a private child care center?
It can
be. A for-profit? So what's in it? What and I mean, if I were an owner of one of those, I would welcome this.
They are. They are. We've had an overwhelming response.
Okay.
I wish we could work with more centers. 100 classrooms per year is what my funding will allow us to do at this point.
Do they get some kind of certification by going through the program or anything like that?
They will. They're going to get well, the teacher, we're going to pay for a scholarship for the teacher to get an associate's degree, a child development associate. So if she or he finishes their associate's degree, they'll have a national credential saying I'm a CDA child credentialed expert teacher, which raises the level of quality at that child care center. The directors are also going to be provided with business advice. I'm going to hire 2 business advisors that will go and advise them on how to run a small business.
Wow.
Typically, directors are like me. They're people who love children and wanted to teach, and so they opened up their own center. But they don't have that expertise in business. So we're going to go in and say, what do you need help with? Marketing, website development, you know, Quicken books. We don't know what to expect from that, but that's a unique piece that will help the director specifically.
Yeah.
And then the parent component I haven't touched on yet, but we will be offering parenting classes for the parents of the children in the classrooms that we're working, as well as home visits. And
so
we're going to.
you'll actually have folks that go into their home and help them.
Yes.
That's excellent.
For those, that part's, you know, strictly voluntary. We don't want parents to feel like we're coming in to tell them they're doing anything wrong, but we want to help and provide them with all the new research, like you mentioned, all the brain research. A lot of people just don't know about that. So we're going to be providing parents with developmentally appropriate practice strategies. I'm going to buy some books and toys and things to have in the home as well as in the classroom. So
they reinforce what they're hearing at the center at home.
Right.
Yeah.
And reinforce that communication with the teacher, how important that is. Your child spends potentially 8 hours a day with this other teacher. You two need to be communicating the teacher and the parent as much as possible and really open those lines. So we're going to try to help improve that. So I think that will strengthen the to keep the continuity of care going for both parties.
I want to ask this question, not at all to be negative. This sounds so common sense, and it sounds so workable, and it sounds win-win.
Right.
Why has this not been done before, I wonder?
Well, it's expensive.
Well, where does this money come from?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that, because it is a privately funded program. We are working with some existing programs, which I'll tell you about, but right now we've had a tremendous support from the business community. Mississippi Economic Council held a meeting back in December of 2007, and over 500 people attended to learn about early childhood education. Funds were raised through Mississippi Economic Council is led right now by Anthony Topazzi with Mississippi Power, and under his leadership a whole new world has opened up, and all this attention has come to it. So we have funding from Mississippi Power, from the Barksdale Foundation, of course, the Phil Hardin Foundation, and we're talking with Entergy and many other foundations right now about funding it, as well as an appropriations request we've put in to keep it going. So funding seems to be the main hold up. Haley Barber has been very supportive of the program. It's just been an issue of funding up to this point as to why this hasn't happened in the past.
Well, let's continue that line just a little bit, if you don't mind. Obviously, those organizations that you mentioned are very generous, trying to help and get it started, but I don't think their purpose would be with it long term necessarily. So that means probably the legislature is going to have to step in at some point and say, and somebody approach them, we need regular ongoing funding for this program.
Right, and that's one of my big job responsibilities, is to keep people informed along the way. You mentioned this is a 3-year project. At the end of 3 years, we'd like to pose this to legislators to be considered to be tied to legislation. So there are 1,708 or 80, something like that, child care centers in our state, and I'm only going to get to work with 100 classrooms. So we really think it's something that we hope could be tied to to legislation that would allow all centers to have access to this if they wanted that additional help. Right now, child care does not get state funding, anything like what this is. They do get certificates, TANF certificates in the voucher system, so they get reimbursed from the state for the number of children that they serve that are low income. And Kathy Grace at the Early Childhood Institute and Department of Human Services have a program called the Quality Rating System. So we're partnering with the Quality Rating System. If you become part of Building Blocks, you become part of QRS, and if you provide higher quality care, you get reimbursed at a higher rate. So that's a win-win for the center. If they take advantage of what we can provide, improve the quality, they will get more funding for their centers. So that's ultimately what we want to do, is to help bring in more resources for them.
Yeah. You know, if you were to have to go today and knock on the door of the legislature and ask for money, it might be a tough sell. As good as the program, you know, as helpful as the program may be, it could be a tough sell right now, but maybe 3 years from now, it may be a different story.
Well, and I have been in touch with legislators, and like I said,
what kind of response are you getting?
Very positive. So I don't expect to have anything less than that in the future, and I think that at that time I'm going to have some pretty significant data to show them how this can impact the future. And, you know, I think that's why the business community is getting it so clearly now, is this is an economic development issue. This is, if you think about our future and you think about training and technology and trying to get more and more young people in our state to move forward, to go to college and get that additional training, if we have the highest dropout rate and we know that early childhood is something that can affect that, I definitely think that people are starting to understand earlier intervention is the key to that.
Yeah. You know, what happens if we don't have a program like this? I mean, we really, you know, I guess go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. You know, we've got to keep moving forward, and we are in a lot of areas. You know, the state is just making excellent strides in a lot of areas, but I mean, this is one place we've really got to put a lot of attention, I guess, based on what you're saying, to be able to do that. I mean, because if we don't, what happens?